that are here late, welcome to the Freethinkers Living Sober workshop on Varieties of Secular Experience. My name is John R., by the way. I am a member of the Freethinkers Living Sober Group in the Verde Valley. So I haven't asked anybody yet. Would somebody care to read the reading for us that we usually do? It's out of Bill Wilson's address to the General Service Conference.
I will, John. I'm happy to.
Thanks, Liz.
Hi, everybody. Liz, alcoholic.
Hey,
In
Liz.
AA, we are supposed to be bound together in the kinship of a universal suffering. Therefore, the full liberty to practice any creed or principle or therapy should be a first consideration. Hence, let us not pressure anyone with individual or even collective views. Let us instead accord to each other the respect that is due to every human being as he tries to make his way towards the light. Let us always try to be inclusive rather than exclusive. Let us remember that each alcoholic among us is a member of AA, so long as he or she so declares. Thank you.
Thank you. Well done.
As freethinkers, we aspire to open-mindedness and to appreciating the sharing of others, particularly those with whom we disagree. We ask only that everyone share without attempting to dissuade, argue, or disrespect anyone else or their beliefs. As a group, we're secular. That is, we do not endorse or oppose any system of belief. We don't have any quarrel with any form of religion. We also don't use prayers of any kind in our workshops or meetings. Our only wish is to assure that suffering alcoholics can find sobriety in AA without having to accept anyone else's belief or having to deny their own. Our workshop today features Tracy S. and Joe C. But before we introduce our speakers for today's topic, which is sponsors, mentors, and monsters, what is sponsorship? I'd like to share some quotes from what I think of as one of the best, if little used, pamphlets produced by AA World Services. It's called Questions and Answers on Sponsorship. So I'm just going to quickly share the screen here. Must the newcomer agree with everything the sponsor says? No. If the sponsor's ideas sound strange or unclear, the newcomer had better speak up and ask questions. Theirs is supposed to be an easy, open relationship in which both parties talk freely and honestly with each other. And the other question they answer is, how can a sponsor explain the AA program? Well, nearly all members who work with newcomers look upon the AA program in terms of their own experience. They tell the new person that no one speaks for AA and that every member is perfectly free to arrive at an individual understanding of the program. Some sponsors talk about the program in a more spiritual way than others do, but nearly all call attention to the source of strength to be found in a power greater than ourselves. Again, the sponsor points out, it is up to the newcomer to determine what that AA phrase means. It expresses an idea that people of many faiths or of no particular faith can and do accept with complete harmony. Our first speaker today is Tracy S. She's originally from Akron, Ohio. Tracy and her husband have lived in Camp Verde, Arizona for many years. So they're right around where our meeting started in 2014. She has over 31 years of continuous sobriety and has literally sponsored hundreds of women, taking them through the AA steps, the Little Red Book, and many continue on through the CODA steps. She's passionate about sponsorship and service, and she sponsors our own Suzanne P. While she is not a member of our secular AA group, she has experience sponsoring people of many different persuasions. I'm very happy and excited to hear her perspective today, and I'd like to thank you for agreeing to speak, Tracy. It's all yours.
Tracy, alcoholic.
Hi, Tracy.
And let me know if you can't hear or I sound funny.
It's breaking up a little bit. I think we'll be able to get.
By thanking the group for asking me to share today, and to thank Suzanne, especially too, for asking me. Can you hear me, or am I still breaking up?
It breaks up a little
Is
bit.
it better now?
It's better now.
somebody raise their hand or do something?
Yeah, it's better
or-
now.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Good,
Yes.
okay, all right. So, all right, I started off with I'm Tracy Alcoholic, and I wanted to thank the group for inviting me today to share my experience, strength, and hope, and to thank Suzanne for inviting me also. When I first received, and I read the title of Call Suzanne and said, wow, that's a pretty title there, the sponsor, mentor, or and I was kind of taken back, but then when my own experience with sponsorship, I've had, if you have a sponsor at one time or another for a sponsor.
Well, we'll put Joe on the spot and let her share after Joe. How's that sound? Is that all right with you, Joe?
Yeah, I'm a run by the seat of the pants kind of guy. That's
I
as
knew
good as
that about
anything.
you. Yeah. Okay. Well, let me introduce our second speaker first. Josie, many or maybe most of you already know Joe because he gets around. He hails from Toronto, Canada. He's been involved in this secular AA phenomenon for quite a while. And I think he first attended our Freethinker meetings back in 2014. And we consider him a member of our group. And I guess he considers himself a member of our group. And if you haven't gotten his book, Beyond Belief, Agnostic Musings, I highly recommend it. And I'm looking forward to your comments, Joe. I think, how about if I go ahead and post these or do these other quotes real quick? What is sponsorship? In AA, sponsor and sponsored meet as equals, just as Bill and Dr. Bob did. Essentially, the process of sponsorship is this. An alcoholic who has made some progress in the recovery program shares that experience on a continuous individual basis with another alcoholic who's attempting to maintain sobriety through AA. And what does the sponsor do? Well, this is the not do portion. Never tries to impose personal views on the newcomer. A good sponsor who is an atheist does not try to persuade a religious newcomer to abandon faith, nor does a religious sponsor argue theological matters with an agnostic newcomer. And when newcomers resist the spiritual side of the program, what can sponsors do? First of all, we can relax and remember that sponsorship does not mean forcing any specific interpretation of AA upon newcomers. Most men and women who have been in AA for more than a few months recognize that its program is based on spiritual principles. At the same time, they appreciate that alcoholics have been able to achieve and maintain sobriety without any belief in a personal higher power. So, Joe, I hand it over to your good hands.
Hello, everybody. I'm Joe. I'm just an average alcoholic
Hey, Joe.
Hey, Joe.
and a sample of recovery. I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience with sponsorship because I'm not a teacher, I'm not an expert, I'm not an instructor. I'm just another alcoholic. And I don't treat sponsorship as sponsor as an authority figure, but a partner. And I don't see them as an educator, but rather a facilitator. I mean, there are certain steps where I need somebody else's help, right? Whether that's the steps of the program or, sort of life problems or whatever else. And I know that a lot of things in AA since I got here, recently I've been saying my sobriety date is the year 44 BCE, which is 44 years before COVID era. And I think that 50 years from now, we're going to look back at this era of AA as a real turning point. And because I don't think we're replacing the way AA has already been done, but I think this has added something to AA in a very big way. Now you can get a sponsor in any time zone or a sponsee in any time zone. But I'm very excited about this time in our histories. But so when I talk about how it was when I was new, I'm not talking about how it should be or how I wish it was for everybody, because everyone's different. And but again, I think everybody is a fellow traveler here. Some of us have been through experiences that you haven't been through yet, and you've been through experiences I haven't been through yet. I never know when I'm sitting down with a sponsee or a sponsor who's going to be the teacher and who's going to be the student. You know, I'm going to learn things in either of those relationships. It seems to be there's a pamphlet now, and you know, and that sort of codifies it a little bit. Although I really do like the pamphlet, as John says, it's very common sense, and it doesn't encourage that kind of sort of authoritative process or that hierarchical approach to the teacher and the student, or the you know, the cop and the robber. You know, when I first got a sponsor, here's how it happened. I was hanging around my group, and someone said, "Hey, Joe," because when I signed up for my group, I gave them the date of my last drink and my first name and my last initial and my phone number. And someone said, "You're coming up on your 3 months, Joe. Who's given you your 3-month chip?" Oh, 3-month chip. Well, who's supposed to? Your sponsor. And someone I knew from recovery was walking by, Nancy, and I said, "Nancy, will you be my sponsor?" And she said, "Yeah, Joe, I'll be your sponsor." I said, "Great, Nancy's giving me my 3-year chip." And, you know, in a sense, anyone will do. In a sense, it just depends really how fussy you are. Now, this was someone I trusted and someone I respected and someone I knew what their recovery looked like for sure. It wasn't sort of a random, can I see a show of hands who's going to be my sponsor, right? You know, it wasn't spinning the roulette wheel. But the first time we really sort of sat down in terms of that role was for step 4 and step 5. You know, we didn't really have a codified way of doing the 12 steps. I mean, they've got workbooks now, and I like them. I was sitting down with someone with one of these things, because I've gone through the steps several different ways with several different people. And we were looking at this Patrick Carnes book on, it's called A Gentle Path Through the 12 Steps. And it talks about, you know, sort of chaotic behavior and rigid behavior, two things that in my recovery I'm trying to avoid. Like if I'm the sponsor, for instance, I don't want to work harder than the sponsee. If I'm working harder than the sponsee, I'm being a little bit codependent there, because if I want something for them more than they want something, maybe they don't want that at all. And then what am I doing? I'm leading them down a path in a direction they're not interested in going. That's not going to work. And they might go along because they think they have to, but that's part of my role, is to have a discussion with people about expectations and boundaries. And I don't have expectations or boundaries, but I want to know what they're going to be. So if someone wants someone who says, "Call me every day, The steps are in order for a reason. We're going to go through this book this way. I'm not that kind of sponsor typically, but if someone said to me, I want to, the first time I ever did the 12 steps exactly as outlined in the book Alcoholics Anonymous was with a sponsee. I was in the role of sponsor already because that's not how I had done the 12 steps, but that's how they wanted to do the 12 steps. So yeah, people are always surprised because at a certain point, the big book developed a certain primacy in terms of its role in AA, and it wasn't the case in 1976, 1977. You'll often hear me say that I didn't read the book until I was 11 years sober, and I read it for historical purposes, and because I had something at 11 years sobriety I didn't have at 11 days sobriety, an attention span. I couldn't have read 146 pages of anything, not even Playboy, right? I didn't have the capacity. My head was too messed up. But I was very reliant on others in my early sobriety. It included this Nancy character who was my sponsor for a while, and she moved on and I had to find someone else, and it became John Mack was his name. He was a bartender and a bus driver. He had 2 jobs. And I remember we would get together to talk in Cousineau's Tavern. Between his doing rounds, he'd sit down, he'd have a smoke, and I'd be drinking my ginger ale. And and don't write that down. These aren't instructions or recommendations. This is just what my experience was back in the early 70s of Montreal. And because that's when he had 2 jobs. When was he free? Well, sometimes on a Sunday afternoon, he had lots of spare time because it wasn't too busy. So, like I said, there isn't a way to do it. And I'm just giving bad examples to show you that anything can work, because he helped me. I stayed sober. It must have helped him. He stayed sober. And the first time I ever did a step 4 was really narrative form, just sort of writing down my secrets and the things about myself that disappointed me and I thought disappointed other people. And I learned a lot. And I did it with a sponsor. Again, if someone had sent me on with a project to do my step 4 and then come back, it never would have got finished, not in a first year of sobriety anyway. And I did my first step 4, months into my sobriety, because for some people, they quit drinking and life gets better. Now, should they get on with the steps? As long as life keeps getting better, just keep doing what you're doing. But for me, I quit drinking and life got real, not better. And the consequences of my years of drinking were, it was, time to pay up. The bond was due, and I had these consequences without my coping mechanism of just getting high and drunk. And, what was I going to do? I needed a replacement for that. And I heard about these steps, so I thought I would try them out. So I had to sit down with my sponsor to do a step 4 with me, because I was just underdeveloped in that sort of capacity. And my sponsor did that with me. And the second time I did it, I was able to do it on my own and then sort of sit down with them and talk about what I learned. But I was, fast forward, it's, like 5, 6, maybe 15 years ago, I guess, someone who's, I always seem to get the problem cases and the fallen angels, the people who have had some, positive experience in recovery and then fallen on hard times, either with a relapse of their drug of choice or some other sort of negative behavior. Could be gambling, sex addiction, or something else has sort of brought them down again. And so I guess I work well with those people because that's my story too, right? At 20 years, I was in more of an emotional low than I was at 20 months. And that's just how this sample of sobriety happened to work out, all for the better. I learned from that too. But someone wanted to go through the book exactly as written. And I remember saying, oh, this is so cool. In step 4, the first thing you do is you write down your resentments. You do everybody else's inventory first. Why didn't they tell me about that? I would have jumped in right on day 2, right? This person pisses me off because of so-and-so, and I don't like the way this person talks to me. And when so-and-so says this, you make me feel blah, blah, blah. And so, I was the sponsor, they were the sponsee, and I was learning. I was learning in real time this sort of process, because it doesn't require an expert. It requires someone who understands. I'm a big believer, you can write this down if you want to, people don't need to be told. They need to feel heard. That's my experience in AA. The reason, I don't know, I can't remember, it's kind of foggy exactly why I came to AA, but I can tell you why I stayed. I felt heard. People heard me. People saw me. People gave me time and put up with me. And I wasn't getting that out there. So I came back for more. It's that simple. And I don't want a relationship with a sponsee where I don't have a routine life where I start my work day at the same time every day and it ends at the same day and it's this many days of the week. Other people need a sponsor who lives a very structured, routine life. If that's what you're trying to emulate, that's what you should follow. And that's the sort of person you should work with. And my sponsor will never call me because that's not his job. My sponsor is kind of my sponsee, right? Like I helped him at one time in his sobriety, and then he came back. Remember, I told you at 20 years, things weren't going so good. Well, I'd done such a good job with him, he could help me out. And so we just became traveling mates in AA. Again, there was never this authority idea, when I'm talking about my problems I'm trying to work out and he's feeding back, or if the roles are reversed, we're just fellows in AA. Patrick is his name. And, I remember you learn your values in AA. I remember he was going through a hard time, and I was going through my second marital breakup. I have 2 natural children, 1 stepson, and they're both boy meets girl on AA campus, romances, so yeah. Anyway, not an expert, so going through this sort of second breakup, things aren't great. He's sort of on this slide, but when he calls, I talk to him and he said, I know you're busy, but not, and I said to him, this gets me every time I say it, because I didn't know I was this kind of person. I said, Patrick, you matter to me, and I have time for you, and I always will. And wow, and I didn't know I had that kind of character. Like I really didn't. And I guess I learned it here. And I remember I had a sponsor that was dying. And so it was sort of, we were having a meeting and he was dying of cancer. And I also did some work for him, some financial work, looked after some of his personal financial stuff. And I would include his wife in that, but she wasn't that interested, and she would also often wiggle out of the meetings that we were having and say, I'll make sandwiches for the kids, right? And he said, so he was dying of cancer, and we just had a meeting in his place because he couldn't get out of bed. And so we brought the meeting to him. And he was keeping a very positive, he's going to beat this thing, blah, blah, blah. And he asked me to stay behind. And again, I had no idea. I remember he asked, Joe, what are your long-term plans? Because, I talked about hating my job and wanting to grab my guitar and go on the road, right? And I knew what he was asking. He wasn't going to be there to look after his 4 kids. Would I be there? And, I said, yes, you can count on me. And again, like I thought, who's saying these words? This isn't me, right? I'm not here for a good time. I'm here for a good time, not a long time, Joe, really. But yeah, and that was years ago. And I still meet with his wife and look after things. And she's retired, right? But she'll take me to lease a car. Like, I don't know anything about leasing cars, right? I'm more a macro guy, but it just helps her out. That's what she needs. And I've learned that really, it's still a sexist world in the automotive world. And if there's a guy there, they get a better deal for repairs and lease rates than if they're not. And I don't know why that is. And I don't think it should be that way, but it is. And I help out in that way. So I have grown in my integrity as a sponsor. I continue to learn. I always bring a beginner's mind. I'm never there to say I need to cover these 3 things when we have this meeting with my sponsee. It's all a matter of, like who's going to take responsibility for their sobriety, them or me? Who's got the answers? I don't have the answers, but can I help them discover their answers? Was it T.S. Eliot who said, forget the great answers. I'm looking for the great questions, right? Can I ask the great questions? And no one gets mad at you for asking questions, right? What does everyone love to talk about most? Themselves, right? If you talk about them and invite people to talk about themselves, they're going to love that, right? And this relationship, like who can sponsor? Anybody can sponsor who has a little bit of empathy. Again, in the 70s, when we were sponsoring, the average sobriety was like 2 to 4 years. There was no one talked about my sponsor took me through the book the way their sponsor took them through. And I'm not making fun of that. That's a fine way to go, but it just wasn't my experience. At 4 months, I was sponsoring people who were 4 weeks sober because no one else was there to do it. And it helped me get sober. And, I was doing public information work talking about AA, and the things I was saying to high school students about sobriety and addiction to alcohol, I was informing them, and I was changing how my brain worked just by saying them out loud. This is a recovery program that requires people. I heard an academic say he studied 3,000 recoveries, and some of them join groups and some of them don't, but nobody recovers alone. Everybody has some recovery capital in the way of friendships, medical help, people they can lean on, the call a friend option, whatever it is, in this program or outside of this program. And I'm a big believer of what are the strengths, not the weaknesses. If you want to talk about how bad you are and how evil you are and make a list of those things, there's use in that. And I've done that and it's all good. But if you've done that and then it didn't work out, maybe we can try something else, right? So I take sort of a positive psychology approach, like I don't believe things like your best thinking got you there. Actually, you're here. So your best thinking got you here. That's not so bad. It is your impulsive thinking that caused the problem out there, not your best thinking. Your best thinking actually got you here. Everybody has the skills to get and stay sober, and if I can help draw that out in people, fantastic. But if you're looking for a list of rules, compassion, I think, is the only thing you need, and that's going to grow with time. And my meaning in life comes from my service in life. I was at our area assembly, boring as, watching paint dry, absolutely hideous, and so repetitive, but someone's got to show up and someone's got to do it. And it was my turn, right? That's part of it too. And that's, I don't know even how long I've rambled on for, but I'm going to save us all by saying thank you for listening.
Thanks, Joe. Okay.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it.
I think we have the problem solved for Tracy. She's going to use her phone for audio and try turning on her video. So Tracy S. from Camp Verde, right down the street from where I live. And I'm looking forward to what you have to say, Tracy. It won't let me unmute you. You're going to have to unmute yourself, I guess, on the phone. That's a *9, I think.
Okay. Yeah.
Did you hear me, Tracy?
Yep. Can you hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you. Great.
Can you hear
And
me
you might
now?
even be
All
able to
right.
turn on your video if you want to.
Loud and clear. Sounds great.
Yeah, I think I'm going to leave the video off though because I don't trust it because of the way it kept bouncing. All right, so sorry about that, Tracy Alcoholic here, and I apologize for my problems here with this laptop. I have a very old laptop, Tracy Alcoholic. All right, so let me start over here and thank the committee and everybody again for allowing me this time to share my experience, strength, and hope on sponsorship. I've been doing this a really long time, and I really enjoyed Joe's speak on his experience with sponsorship, and it sounds like me and him have a lot of similarities in our style and our way of sponsoring. My sponsor herself said something very similar to the way I sponsor. Somebody asked her about me the other day, and they said, "Oh, so you're up here," and they put their hand up here, and she said, "Oh no, we're here," and she did like an even thing across. And I think that's the way I sponsor now today, even though in the beginning that isn't the way. I think as we grow older, at least I've changed the style of sponsorship that I've done, and that just comes from experience. And as time goes on, I think I kind of have mellowed out a little bit. One of the things that I do when I first sponsor somebody, I do wait for them to ask me, because I have learned that, you wait for somebody to come to you before you jump in there. That gives them it helps them decide if they want to work with you. It makes it easier on them and you. But I always just sit and meet with them, and I let them know my style of sponsorship, because I think everybody has a different way of doing that. I believe in sponsorship because I think the program's hard to do, and I think it's a hard thing to navigate through. And there's all kinds of different ways of doing it. And I let them know my style, and I let them know that my style is, I believe in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. I believe in working the steps. I believe in doing meetings, and I let them know that my style also is that I end up becoming your friend, that I will drag them along and do events with them, and I will sit with them in meetings, and I will kind of involve them in my life and involve in theirs. And I get that from my first sponsor, because my first sponsor did that for me. Because when I arrived in Alcoholics Anonymous, I didn't have any friends. I didn't have anybody. I was kind of a solo person. And I was very grateful that she took me along and took me in and showed me different meetings and introduced me to different people, and went out to dinner with me and went to breakfast with me and kind of took me around. And I was very grateful for that. I had a relapse at about 2 years of sobriety. And she took me to a part in the big book that says practical experience shows us that nothing's going to keep me from drinking than extensive work with newcomers. And she said, Tracy, if you don't do this, you're not going to stay sober. She said, if you don't get out there and start working, a lot of people say you've got to have a year of sobriety, or you got to do this, or you got to do that, or or you can't sponsor. And she said, you can't wait. You're going to have to immediately start working. I picked up a 24-hour tip on a Thursday, and that Sunday I was driving for Lark. It was a county drunk tank way back in the day down by the airport in Phoenix. And I was driving, and I had, 4 days of sobriety. That first year of driving for the county drunk tank, I probably had 300 sponsees that first year. Out of that 300 sponsees, not one of them ever called me. They'd ask for my phone number, but not one of them would ever call me. The only person that stayed sober in that first year was me. My sponsor was right in that if I worked with people, I was going to be the one that stayed sober. And I seen that. And I also seen that in that first year, my level of happiness and my level of feeling a little bit better about me started to get better. I started to understand things in the rooms a little bit better. I started to understand me a little bit better. I still didn't have a higher power, because I came into the rooms not wanting anything to do with God or anything. So I had to use my sponsor's higher power and her understanding, because it took me a long time to get any type of higher power. When I sponsor somebody, I don't ask them any of the questions about their God, because it's none of my business. I sit down and go over some things with them as far as, this is the style, this is how I do it, and we have to kind of iron out, are they okay with that? Are they willing to do? What aren't they willing to do? What I'm willing to do? What they're not willing to do? And we have to have this discussion back and forth on, what is the level going to be? What is it going to look like? I have enough experience now to know that if they're not willing to show up with their book and their homework and do the stuff that I say that this is what we're going to do, then there's no sense to it work. I believe in the program, and I believe in doing the steps and doing this work, or it's a waste of my time and their time. And maybe I'm not a good fit for them. And I know that I'm not always going to be a good fit for somebody. I've had monster sponsees. I've had people that have, cussed me out, screamed and hollered at me, thrown things at me, gotten so irate with me because I didn't like what I said. That's just the way it is. I know a lot of people don't sponsor. I think you learn more from sponsoring than you learn from actual being the sponsee. I have learned more from being a sponsor than I would have ever learned by not sponsoring. I think you get more out of the program by being a sponsor. I think people that don't sponsor, I think they're cutting themselves short. I think they're losing so much valuable lessons that the program has to offer. I think that's the guts, I guess, the glory of the program. I mean, there's so many promises in sponsorship. I have formed so many wonderful relationships by sponsoring, because the people that I sponsor, I end up becoming really good friends with. And it ends up being, like Joe said, it ends up being this beautiful relationship that ends up developing. And then they go on to sponsor, and the people that end up being helped because of it, it isn't a authoritative relationship. It's here's what I've learned. Here, let me pass this on to you, because I was freely giving this information. Let me freely give it to you. Here it is in the book. This is where I learned it. Here's the page it's on. Here this is. Here's that. Let me show you where it is. And I would have cut myself so short, and it would have taken me years to figure this stuff out in this book if I wouldn't have had the sponsor show me where step 1's at, where step 2 at, where's step 3 at in the big book. So she showed me and had me mark it, and then I can show people, this is where this is at. None of this stuff that I've been able to teach and show people where it's at, I didn't figure this stuff out. I was showed and taught by my sponsors where this stuff was at. And then I've been able to teach and show people where this stuff's at. You know, I've been so blessed by other sponsors and people in meetings that have showed, you know, because I do a lot of meetings. I believe in meetings. I believe in the fellowship. I believe in all of the stuff that the program has to offer. I have been doing this a long time, and I'm at a point in my life and in my program now that I still do the same stuff that I did that first couple of years. I got so much out of it that I don't. A friend of mine, Mick, that he just passed here a few years ago. He used to say all the time, I don't know what part of what I do today is what has me happy, joyous, and free, and I'm afraid to stop doing any of it. So I have to continue to do everything that I do. And it's doing the meetings, it's sponsoring, it's having a sponsor, doing the events, doing the service work, doing all of these little things that add up to the happy, joyous, and free. When I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, you know, I knew I had a drinking problem, and I knew the common denominator on all of the disastrous things in my life was me. And I had no idea how to get out of this stuff. I had no idea what it was going to take to get any type of joy in my life, because I had none. And my sponsor had me write out a list of what I wanted out of life. I found that list, and boy, did I cut myself short. I have so much more today, and I know I'm not a dumb woman. I know that it's because of Alcoholics Anonymous, and it's because I didn't do half measures. I didn't do. Marcia used to say to me all the time, "How happy do you want to be? You know, what length are you willing to go to? How happy do you want to be, Tracy?" I'll tell you, I want to be happy. I want that happy, joyous, and free that book talks about. You know, and our book talks a lot about it. It gives us so many promises from the beginning to the end. And throughout the 12 and 12, it talks about sponsorship. And to me, sponsorship isn't it's not an authoritative person. It is somebody that's supposed to hold your hand and walk you through and be that friend with you through all this stuff that you're supposed to go through. And sometimes it gets rough. Sometimes it gets hard. Sometimes it's a sticky situation. And some sponsors, and your flyer said that, some sponsors can be monsters. You know, I had one that was a pickle. She wasn't a nice lady, and it took me a year to get rid of her and just get her out of my life. And I learned a lot from her on what I never would be. And I know that's why my HP put her in my life to begin with, so I could see, Tracy, don't ever be like that as a sponsor. Don't ever do those things to people, because it don't feel too good. And I held on to that, and I share that with the women that I work with, so they know, you know, don't do these things, because this is how this feels and this is how that looks, and you don't ever want to be like that as a sponsor. You know, I make that a requirement of being a sponsor of mine, is to get out there and work with people, get out there and be available. Go up to the woman that just walked in the room and say, "Hi, how are you? How are you doing tonight?" You know, we have to be out there to be available for people. You know, it's our rooms today aren't like they used to be. You know, we have treatment centers now that kind of do the first 3 months and do the newcomer thing. So we don't get to do the 12-step calls as much as they used to be. You know, I know 30 years ago, I got called out to go to a lot more 12-step calls than I get to now. Matter of fact, I got called to go to on one right now, like 20 minutes ago. I got a text, "Hey, can you go for a 12-step call?" Which I haven't been called out on a 12-step call in probably 8 months, you know. So as soon as I hang up here, I'm running out the door for a 12-step call. So I love doing 12-step calls. I love doing sponsorship. I love doing the work with Alcoholics Anonymous, because it keeps me sober, keeps me happy, keeps me right in the middle, because I want to die sober. You know, I love this program. This program has given me a life. My grandchildren will never see their grandmother drunk. They will never see their grandmother high. And it's all because of the work of Alcoholics Anonymous, that my sponsor was willing to take her time to spend with me, to teach me what's in these books, you know. And I could have never found it on my own, and I know that. And I'm not a dumb woman. I'm a pretty smart woman. But there's things in this book that, you know, I might have eventually found it, but it would have been a lonely finding sitting there reading it by myself. I'm glad that I had somebody sitting there reading it with me and showing it and taking me, because, you know, I'm a loner, and I still am. You know, I still have a hard time hooking up with people. So it was nice. And, you know, and I look for women like I felt in the meetings. You know, I see that girl that walks in and looks like I can always feel it, you know. And I like to go invite her. And I don't have to be your sponsor to go say, hey, you know, why don't you come sit with me? Hey, why don't you, hey, you want to go have a sandwich afterwards or whatever, you know? Because AA can still be a lonely place, you know? I didn't get to AA being real social, not being a social butterfly, you know. It took me a long time in the rooms to even be able to talk to people. You know, now it can't get me to shut up, but, you know, it took me a really long time to fit in. You know, I didn't fit in out there, and I didn't fit in when I got to the rooms of AA, and even today, still at times I don't fit in. So I enjoy taking new people, newcomers, and, you know, you got to meet people where they're at. So if, you know, somebody comes in that's 20 years sober, you know, you got to figure out where they're at and see where they want to start working at, because I believe we all always have work that we can do. You know, I always have something that I can work on and get just a little bit better at. You know, I will never be that brand new shiny penny. I always got a little rust somewhere that I could polish off and get just a little bit better at. And, you know, this is a wonderful life now that I'm sober, you know, and I want to keep it that way. I don't want to ever lose it. I don't want to ever lose my zest and the love that I have and the joy that I have for Alcoholics Anonymous, because it gave me everything. I don't ever want to lose. You know, I owe a debt. I owe a debt to Alcoholics Anonymous and to all the people that came before me and were there to help me when I first came in. I owe a debt to them that I will never, ever be able to repay. You know, for the things that I did when I was out there, I can make as many amends as I can possibly make, but I owe a living amends. My husband says it best. You know what? I couldn't pick up a drink today because I couldn't look at the people that were there for so many times saying, just call me, just call me, just call me, and go have a cup of coffee with me first before you pick up. So today I belong to that no matter what club. No matter what, today Tracy doesn't pick up. No matter what. I'll make some phone calls first and go have a cup of coffee with a couple people first, because I know enough people that I could give them a call and have that cup of coffee before I pick up a drink. And that has to do with sponsorship, and good sponsorship and bad sponsorship, you know, and the people in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. Because some days, everybody in that room has been my sponsor, you know, just as much as I've been their sponsor. I don't get introduced to, and that's one of the things I do when I have that first meeting with somebody that has asked me to sponsor them. One of the first things I tell them is, don't introduce me as your sponsor. I don't like being introduced as a sponsor. I don't even like people saying that's my sponsor. You tell them I'm your friend, because that's what I'm going to become. I'm going to become your friend. That's what we enter into. We enter into a friendship, and we're going to build on that friendship. I don't like being singled out, because then I feel like I got to act differently or something. I don't want to act differently. All I am is a drunk. I'm a drunk that has a couple steps ahead of you in this program. That's all I am. And I'm going to hopefully teach you how to stay sober one day at a time. And then you're going to be teaching me as we go along this journey. And that's what I've learned from all the sponsors ahead of me and all the people ahead of me, because I've had just as many, you know, sitting in the room that have taught me stuff too. They didn't have to have a sponsor title. And it had nothing to do with anything other than that they wanted me to stay sober one day at a time. I got old man Larry Curtis that I bounced an ashtray off of his head one time because he used to make me so mad I just wanted to pinch him. And he sponsored me on all kinds of stuff, helped walk me through all kinds of things. Oh, I had so many resentments that I didn't want to have to work on, and he'd tell me I had no choice, I had to work on them, and I'd get so angry at him. And that was sponsoring me to get me through that stuff so that I didn't drink one day at a time, so I could be part of that no matter what club. So we do all kinds of sponsoring of people, but I needed one by name that I could take all them little dirty secrets to so that I didn't drink again. You know, this is a wonderful, wonderful deal, and I think I've gone on long enough. So thanks again for having me, and wrap this thing up. Thank you. I'm done.
Thanks, Tracy. I really appreciate it. Great job. And hopefully you'll be able to stick around in case people have any questions they want to ask, which is also fine. Please remember this is being recorded, so keep anonymity in mind. I have opened up the chat, so you'll be able to chat back and forth if that's your desire. Please use the raise hand function, and I'll try and call on people in order. Can you turn your sound down? I have to tell my wife to turn her sound down so I don't get an echo. And once you get to about 3 or 4 minutes, I may do this just to tell you that you're going to have to start going on and on and on. And a reminder, as free thinkers, we aspire to open-mindedness and to appreciating the sharing of others, particularly those with whom we disagree. So we ask that everybody share without attempting to dissuade or argue or disrespect anybody else. I just want to remind you that next month we'll have another workshop, the last Sunday of the month, 11 a.m. Pacific and 2 p.m. Eastern. So stay tuned. It'll be a surprise speaker. And I really appreciate everybody being here. And I did want to mention one thing that is happening in my life right now. I've been sober for a while, and the a guy that I 12-stepped about 35 years ago actually got sober. He's a guy I'd known for a long time. We went to college together. And in fact, I'm the one who turned him on to dope the first time. But he and his wife both got sober, and she just passed away a couple of weeks ago. We're going to be doing a celebration of her life, and I was his earliest sponsor, and he's gone through a lot of sponsors since. And I guess we're sponsoring him again because he's going through some stuff. And to me, that's just one of the kinds of things that happens a lot in Alcoholics Anonymous. So enough out of me. And thank you, Joe. And thank you, Tracy, again. And let's start with Megan from Atlanta.
Megan and I earned my seat.
Hey, Megan.
The two of you made me cry. Thank you very much. Tracy, I identify with your compassion and your enthusiasm for this program and for sponsorship and for the big book. And there's a paragraph on page 11 of the pamphlet, Member's Eye View of Alcoholics Anonymous, that reads, "I am personally convinced that the basic search of every human being from the cradle to the grave is to find at least one other human being before whom they can stand completely naked, stripped of all pretense or defense, and trust that person not to hurt him, because that person has stripped themselves naked too. This lifelong search can begin and end with the first AA encounter." And that will always, for me, be the most powerful piece I've heard from the literature, because it is about being transparent for me, this service work, and yes, my sponsorship techniques have changed so dramatically that it's actually humorous. I was that, you'll call me every day if you want what I have, you'll do what I did. Jesus, well, please don't do what I did. Please don't do what I did. Today I know that that's a really bad idea. Don't do what I did. Do what everybody else did, because they did it the easy way, and I didn't. I came kicking and screaming. That's just my experience. But I think it's important that we recognize that we sponsor, and that other people recognize that they found the humility to accept help from a sponsor. And I came in not needing anything from anyone, because I was so tough and I was so strong and I didn't need you. And I was wrong. It was lonely trying to do it by myself, and it was really unhealthy, and I did a lot of damage. And accepting help from someone, when I finally did get a sponsor who was not a monster, because my very first person was, my life started to change so quickly, and I started to change so quickly that I didn't recognize myself. And that was the goal. So, yeah, I actually just had an old sponsee from early sobriety come back in and ask me to work with them. And on our first sit down last week, I was told that I had become soft, and that I was not the person she remembered. And I was so grateful for that. that it was ridiculous. So thank you for letting me share.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Dave, G.
Thanks, John. Cheers.
Good to see you.
Cheers, John. Thanks, mate. Cheers. Thanks, Joe and Tracy. Yeah, my brain's a lot better than it was, but I was trying to, as you do, you know, try to pick out things that I really liked from both the shares, and I absolutely hold what you said, Joe. The power of just being, you know, listened to. You know, what a power that is. And I say that because, you know, that was what I was always wanting to feel, but I never even recognized it when I was in amongst my isolation and all that really unhelpful behaviors. You know, I basically developed this, it wasn't even a strength, this tough guy, this veneer of, you know, and it was like I was sending out this vibe. You come near me, you surely know me. I'll step on your toes and I'll show you because I'm a tough guy. And it was really, really unhelpful, you know. And it's taken me a long time to try to use the kind of a metaphor that you hear, like, you know, but take down those walls. It's a pretty decent one, you know, that take down those bricks and those walls. I'm definitely still a work in progress, you know. I'm not justifying it, but I'm human, you know. I sometimes take on board stuff and I recognize it and then got to let it go. But feeling listened to, fantastic, yeah. And I don't know if I'm an exception. I could honestly say this. If you was to tell me what piece is that in the big book or that in the book, I couldn't tell you. And I'm not daft. I've got 2 degrees. I've got a degree in psychology. I've got a degree. But you know how you take an information to feel enthusiastic about. You know, ask me about music. You know, ask me about something like that, and I can. I'm a music nerd. I'm a geek. Love music. Ask me about the big book. I really don't know nothing about it because, to be honest, it doesn't light my fire. The only thing I know about it is the spiritual life is not a theory. We have to live it. That's the only thing I can honestly say that I remember about it. And Tracy, yeah, absolutely. It's just a fact. I've been not drunk alcohol for over 28 years, but cheers, I was a mess, and I have no qualms about saying that on my journey, I've actually said it over the last few years, you know, I could do a sponsor. And the universe isn't providing me with one, but he's provided me with people who's helped me every step of the journey over the period of time. But I've no qualms if somebody, you know, if it came in my life and I thought, yeah, I've no qualms because life's too short, I think. Life is fucking far too short to be struggling on our own. I'm able to help folk, and I'm sure people are able to help me. You know, yeah, and I like that AA pamphlet as well. It was good that it was read out. What a powerful pamphlet that is. You know, I think I'll just wave it in front and slap it in the front of every evangelist. No, I just say it. So, yeah, sponsorship is good. It doesn't, for me, it doesn't get taught. I love Tisnoo. I go there regular, and it doesn't get talked about, I don't think, enough. You know, enough. You know. So, thanks, folks. Cheers.
Thanks, Dave. Liz.
Thank you, John. Hello, everybody. I'm Liz, and I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Liz.
Hi, I'm an alcoholic of the alcoholic variety. And I'm a bit, first of all, I want to thank the host and co-host and for your service. I want to thank you guys, all of you and women. And I think guys, I mean everybody. And it is a great gift to be here this afternoon with you. And Josie, and I actually have Josie's book. Plus, I have books that mention Josie. I don't only have Josie's book, I have books that actually quote Josie and say, like, you know, refer to Josie, you know, secular sobriety. So, and I just wanted, this is what I want to share. My sober date's May 17, 1997. I'm bearing down a day at a time. an hour at a time on a quarter of a century sober, and I didn't think that was possible. I'm a firm believer in without you, there is no me. Okay, that's how I fly in Alcoholics Anonymous. I have, though, made myself likely sick, and I'm going to get serious here for a second, in the body, and never mind all the another A, which I actually heard in Josie's share about being heard, about the greatest gift you could give to someone, a sister, brother, traveler, a sponsor, is to let them know they're heard. Because I don't know about you all, but I did not fly into Alcoholics Anonymous on the wings of self-worth, or because I was heard or cherished as a child. So I learned at 20 years sober 5 years ago what that was all about. I actually had a major emotional backslide because I've been a big Zoom baby now for 2 years. And I'll end with this. This is why I love you guys. I'll be back. I'm going to come to more meetings. To find you now is such a gift, because I found myself getting sucked into the old AA joke. You get a bunch of underachieving, highly competitive, overachievers that underachieve, that are very competitive, and tell them that the most spiritual one wins. And that's what, I feel that every Zoom I've been in for 2 years has been about, with speaker meetings, I'm the closest to God. You're right. And if you don't get God, you'll die. And I've been making, which is fine. That's great. And I fall into the category of sponsors who sponsor women who are agnostic, who are atheists, who are this, who have Jesus as their Lord and Savior. I'm an observant, non-religious Jew. I don't care. But I feel that I've been preached at via my iPad screen for 2 years via Zoom, which is a gift to Zoom. COVID was a gift because it brought Zoom into my life. I sponsor women all over the globe. I just want to say that you're a gift, because to be with like-minded people where I could say something like this and not have the whole room gasp in shock and horror is so fabulous. So you'll see me again. Thank you very much. And yes, Megan, back at you. I'm going to text you. Thank you, guys.
All right, Liz, thanks. It's great
Hey,
to see you.
Hey, John, who took my hand down? I was way up on the list there.
I have no idea.
That's 2 Sundays in this crowd that's happened. I don't know how the
boxes move around quickly. Sometimes it just the wrong thing.
That's 2 varieties that's happened in a row. Okay, I'll wait. I'm in line. It's just an unusual circumstance.
I think it was probably personal, Al. Okay, Aggie or Bruce.
Hi, I'm Aggie, that's what my friends call me anyway. And my name was Bruce, my given name. And I got a little bit of a recovery story to go with that. I guess I should say this. Start off right. I am an alcoholic, and my name is, and my friends call me Aggie. I've been sober.
Hey, Aggie.
I've been sober today for 37 weeks. Not 37 days, but 37 weeks.
Yeah.
Not 37 years, but 37 weeks. And actually 37 is kind of an odd number about this whole thing, because I first came into the program through the doors of AA 37 years ago, and had I don't know, 36 years ago, something like that, because I had a little marijuana problem. Actually, my wife had a problem with my little marijuana, and they said something like, you need to come into a treatment program, clean and sober. And I said, well, you're not listening. I don't want to come in sober. I don't have a problem drinking. We drink. My wife and I drink, and who we are. Anyway, it took me going out and coming back in and going out and coming back in enough times to figure out that I could kill myself with alcohol. I didn't even need heroin to do it. And I did that this summer. I mean, just about killed myself. And I called a friend of mine who I knew in the program, and he has become my sponsor. He took me to my first meeting, and for all of that, and for you today coming into my life, I will be forever grateful. I struggle with the spiritual. No, I don't struggle with the spirituality part of this. Of the AA. I struggle with the religious part of AA. I'm far from agnostic. I tell people what I am, as where my spirituality lies, and they say, "Well, I'll pray for you." Well, that was a gift. Anyway, yeah, I'm pagan. My wife's a witch, and she's married to a witch, and we're both perfectly happy with that. All of the pagan ceremonies that we've done, we had our clothes on, just like all the Christians I know. They had their clothes on. They were the same naked as I was because they were naked underneath their clothes. I think that goes for Jewish people or Muslim people or Hindus, whatever. Doesn't matter to me. What matters is what's inside me. And it's difficult when, somebody talks about in heathens and not under, chasing or praying to their gods. That it just drives me a little bit crazy. And that happened this morning in a meeting. And by the grace of God, somebody in that group happened to post a link to this group. And it sounds like you have similar views as me, where I can come in and sit down and say, yeah, I've got a real strong bond with my spiritual guide. And I can use it, and I can say it plural, because I'm dualistic. I'm male and female in here. Hell, if 70 or I'm 71 years old, and if 65 years ago, that would have had to look at all the sexual preference choices that the kids are facing today. I don't know which side of the coin I might have dropped in on. And honest to God, it doesn't matter. And I use the term God because it's easier than saying any of the other words that mean the same thing to me, because that is what it matters to me. What it matters to me is my higher power. I had a clinch. I've got to press the edge here and go a little bit
time.
Long. All right, maybe another day. I'll tell you about the resentment that I gave up against St. Patrick.
I got a few Irish friends that would help you talk about that if you want. Suzanne.
Hi, I'm Suzanne. I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Suzanne.
Hey, great to be here today, and I want to thank Josie and Tracy so much for your shares on sponsorship. And Tracy, you were introduced as my sponsor, but you are my best friend, and that is what happened. I just want to say that the passion that some of you hear from me on these meetings about the steps in Alcoholics Anonymous comes directly from Tracy, passing it on to me. And I was one of those women that she spoke about that came into the rooms completely scared to death and anxious and scared. And, she was able to come up to me and take me out to lunch and help me be able to learn how to share and speak in these rooms. And, sponsorship, the relationship is so important to me in both directions. And it's just, an invaluable part of my program. And I would never have been able to get through the steps without having a great sponsor and without having that friendship and that intimacy and trust that develops. And I think both of you got that across really well. So I just wanted to say thank you to both of you, and great to be here. Thanks for letting me share.
Thanks, Suzanne. Larry.
All right, I get to talk. We love to talk. I'm Larry. I'm alcoholic.
Hey, Larry.
Came in 76, was out from 75 to 76, 4 relapse. Sober date 9/15/18. Love you guys. You are a breath of fresh air. Thanks, Mike the gangster from ATL, for turning me on to this meeting. And also Aggie Ark and me traveled here from Australia today by Zoom. Love the speakers. Love that the second one was first and the first one was second. Not really linear a lot, you know. So like do the steps in order and all that. I like the cat last week. Just throw out 6-pack. I can really like that. 6 steps. Or what with all 13 step and all that. I said, that's fine. Let's have 16 steps. 13, finance and romance. 14, clean up the damage from 13. And then 15, service. And 16, as my friend in another meeting says, the big surprise. Whatever happens at the end. But you guys are a fresh air. Never know what I'm going to get. Last week was production values. This week, really, both speakers could have been in a non-secular. I like that. You know, that was cool. As far as my experience on a sponsor, there's not enough. I want every one of y'all. I'm an addict. I want, especially the ever grateful Jeb, who looks like that actor. I can't think of his name. I want every one of y'all to be my sponsor. So every one of you, please, love to take you home with us. We'd like to take you home. So anyway, I'll close with this. So I had a sponsor. I hadn't had many sponsors. I think people think I must be crazy or something. I don't want to be like that guy. But I had a few that, so one in particular, I said, you know, this guy ain't going to stay sober unless he goes to prison. He went to prison and he stayed sober. And then I relapsed. So now I call him my sponsoree, sort of like Mike G knows the song Sugaree, sponsoree. So, and I'm going to talk to my sponsor in an hour. And I didn't ask for him. My best friend, who hardly goes to a meeting, went to a meeting and picked him for me, like the old school marriages where they pick your spouse. But anyway, those were lovely speeches. I love to read the book. And John, you remind me of my Uncle Tom, a great drunk. And the speaker, I love your voice. I love your voice. God, I love your voice. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Larry. Hey, Tim in Ultiwa.
I'm Tim in Ottawa.
Hey, Tim.
Both of the speakers today. I recently read something that commented on sponsorship, and their AA put together a group of trustees and staff members that talked with mental health professionals about writing the new pamphlet that AA is trying to develop for mental health professionals. And one of the comments they received was that some of the mental health professionals felt that brochure would be better if it referred to sponsors as a recovery coach. I was kind of curious what both the speakers think about that idea. I heard some degrees of recovery coach and what both said, that the person is listening and that the person is outlining a path towards recovery, a lot like a therapist does. And I think in some sense, maybe they see the sponsor or recovery coach, whatever we want to call it, as somewhat of a layman psychotherapist. Although it's a little different than that in that, particularly as Tracy said, it's a two-way street in which the sponsor is getting every bit as much, if not more, than the sponsee. So I wondered what your thoughts were about recovery coach versus sponsor. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Well, Tracy, Joe, Either of you have a comment to make on that?
I took a course on recovery coaches because I wanted to write about it. And I'm glad I took the course, and I'm not a recovery coach. But I mean, a recovery coach, like some of the best sponsors aren't going to be good recovery coaches because they're AA experts. And if you're a recovery coach, you need to sort of first thing you need to do is unpack all your own biases and just leave them outside the room, right? Like whatever it is, 90 meetings in 90 days, or this is the way, or whatever, because you need to again help them find their path as opposed to push or pull them in a certain direction. And recovery coaching, I think, is great. I think they can do things that more expensive professionals don't need to do.
Zoom. Enter your meeting ID followed by pound.
And that's enough for me.
Tracy, did you want to say anything about that? Okay. She may be trying to call back in or something too.
I think she's trying to call back in.
Yeah. Okay, well, we'll give her a chance if she wants to.
There she is. Just give her a second to connect.
Okay, Megan, whatever you say.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Go.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Loud and
Tracy.
clear. Perfect.
Yes.
Well, I usually get pretty upset when I hear something like that. I would have to talk to my sponsor. I would not, as far as the meeting coach or whatever you said that what did they want to call us? The coach or something?
Yeah, recovery
Is that the
coach,
question?
I think is what they were calling it.
Recovery yeah, no, I don't do change real well, and I would be like, no. That kind of went along with when they did the whole thing in court where they were asking sponsors to testify, and they ended up saying that the information we received was privileged and all that. I got called to do that once, and I was like, nope, I would not testify against a sponsee. I wasn't going to do it, I would not like to be called a recovery coach. No, because, after you're with somebody sponsoring them for a long time, no, I wouldn't want to be called a recovery coach, because no, that just is, to me, is off-putting. I would want to look up the definition of both of those words and look up the word sponsorship. What is that? I'm sponsoring somebody to go through the steps. I'm not, to me, a coach would be somebody down on the floor smacking a mat like a wrestling pad. No, I wouldn't like that. I mean, I would take that back to my home group, and my vote would be no, because that's where it's going to have to go. It'll have to go all the way through, and thank goodness, and with an AA, things move like a snail, and hopefully it would go to a vote, and my vote would be no. I'd like to remain being a sponsor, and that's it. That word has held up this long. I'd like it to stay the same.
All right.
That's going to be a good discussion on that, though, because I personally, I think sponsor is a good word, and to be flipped over to be called a coach, no, because I don't think a coach is a two-way street. Sponsor is a two-way street. I don't see that a coach is. That's my opinion.
All right.
And everybody's allowed
Thanks,
to have an opinion. Thank you.
Okay, Kenji.
Hey, why don't you let Al get in there first?
Okay,
Al. Out of the order.
Thanks, Kenji. One hell of a guy, buddy. I don't really have a whole hell of a lot to say, but I do have something to say. That's the main thing. Cookie cutter AA just does not fucking work for most of us. We just don't stamp them in and push them on through. It's one of the big, it's like, I'm going to teach you how I did it and the way my sponsor taught me how to do it. We're not teachers in here. We're actually storytellers and people who share our experience. You know, it's not my job to reform you or interfere in your life any way whatsoever. I can tell you how I did it, or here's some stuff you might want to look at. But the cookie cutter stuff, it's just doesn't work, especially with alcoholics like me. But and that group think thing, we all think alike and do alike, and by God, we'll all get sober alike. It's out the window for me. I don't know, but I don't know. Like I said, my mind was going blank on a whole lot of it, but it's an individual thing with a sponsor, and it does become a friendship thing in general. But other than that, I guess the group thing and the cookie cutter thing are things that drive me a little wacko in here. And we don't attract people, and the people very often, a lot of people, there's millions of people who will not come to AA for various reasons. And one of them is that, they get a feeling that they have to find a spiritual force or a higher power or God to get sober and maintain that sobriety. Just not true. A lot of us in here are atheists. I think you're reading, John, where you mentioned or it showed the higher power statement with a capital P. No, that's not true at all. Not all of us come to that conclusion. We just don't. We're not even close to being that way. But that's enough of my rambling. I forgot what I was going to say anyway. Again, Kenji, thanks, buddy.
Thank you, Al.
Thanks,
Thanks a
Al.
lot.
Always good to hear from you, buddy. And Kenji.
Hey, Kenji, addict alcoholic, human in
Hey,
recovery.
Kenji.
It's been a great meeting. I've really enjoyed it so far. Sorry I was a bit late. I didn't catch the beginning of Joe's share, but I can always catch it on the tape. So, which I will listen to as soon as it gets posted. Because I was definitely into what I did here. And, I'm always amazed when I hear Joe say that in the late 70s, nobody read the big book in AA, at least where he was. Because in the early 80s, when I came into AA, where I did on the West Coast of California, on the West Coast in Southern California, I got sober. I live in LA. I live in San Francisco now. I got sober in LA originally. Everybody read the big book, or everybody that I knew of read it. There was a big book study and a 12 and 12 study every week was what I thought everybody did. Even the people in secular AA, because I found a secular group very early on, the We Agnostics group, Friday night meeting in Hollywood, that then branched into 2 or 3 other meetings, all of which are still going. So I have a lot of experience. I have no experience being a sponsor. I do have a sponsee in name only, I think. We've never really worked much together, but he did ask me to be my sponsor, and we've talked very occasionally on the phone, and I'll see him across the meeting from time to time. I've been sponsorless for many years. I've spent years looking across the room trying to figure out from afar who would be the right sponsor for me. And what I got from that was learning that was a waste of time. I've had a bunch of sponsors. I found out that if a sponsor doesn't work out, I can just say, thank you for being willing to work with me, and move on. And some of them will get a resentment from that, and most of them won't. And that's on them. I had a sponsor who was one of these big men on campus. He was a big electronics music musician, had a huge following, had tons of sponsees, had 40-something years sobriety. And he was my sponsor for a while, and being his sponsee meant that you had reserved seating at these big meetings. He never went to small meetings. He only went to big meetings because his sponsees would get there and they'd reserve the whole second row. And if they needed the third row in the meeting for the sponsorship family. And that was kind of cool in a way, and it was kind of weird in a way too. I've never been much of a group person. And then when the relationship with that guy broke down, I was out of the club. And that felt really weird too. It felt like, I had been, definitely got, told, nobody had actually told me to kick rocks, but that's what it felt like. And that's on later. I've done a lot of inventory around that guy and had other probably my next to most recent sponsor finally tell me, that guy doesn't want to talk to you. He doesn't want to hear amends from you. That's his right. Don't obsess on it. Leave him alone. And okay. I've gotten a lot out of sponsorship. I've gotten a lot out of doing the program the traditional way, big book-based step work. And even though I've never been a God-fearing person, I grew up in no religion. I've had the experience of working one-on-one with somebody in a Zoom room where we read the big book together. I consider myself agnostic. He calls himself an atheist. And we read the big book together. I had more time than he did and definitely more experience with that book. And we read it. And as we went paragraph by paragraph, we discussed it, what we related to, what we couldn't relate to. And we both had a terrific experience. We both really enjoyed it. I'd love to do that some more with people, maybe in a small group. I've talked about that for quite a while, forming a small book club meeting where we read the big book together and discuss it as we go as a secular group. Got it, John. And maybe one of these days I'll actually put my money where my mouth is and actually start that meeting. Thanks.
Thanks, Kenji. So we've come to the 12:30 in my time, the hour and a half point, but we still have more people who have their hands raised, and we'll get to every single one of them. But I just wanted to acknowledge that's where we are. And if you need to leave, please feel free to do that. And Bernadette, would you like to share?
Sure. My name is Bernadette. I'm an alcoholic.
Hey,
I'm waving you from Poland. So, yeah, I got sober in Southern California almost 29 years ago. And I moved back to Poland 10 years ago. And when talking about sponsorship, and first, I'm so glad I got to this meeting. And thank you, Joe and Tracy, because I heard about Joe at our secular meeting, AA and AA in Poland. And what I want to say, I am not really a religious person also, and I'm so glad I found this meeting and my AA in Poland also, because my view on everything is much wider right now. And what I notice right now in Poland is more and more people who are not religious and they need something else. Because, Poland, Catholic country. And most of the people at the meetings, they talk about God and they talk about the Catholic God. I did have a problem with that when I came 10 years ago, because it's also like a candle on the table, when you walk in and you see the candle and they talk about God. So, oh my God, where we are. Yeah. And more people are interested in secular meetings. And I'm so glad because, I kind of help them, because even when I start to sponsor, I'm just trying to explain them the difference. You don't need to go to church. You can choose your higher power, something, if you don't. And it's really interesting right now. But about the sponsorship, you see, I was so tied with my sponsor in California. When I came in here, the sponsorship actually in Poland started like 10 years ago. Like before, they didn't have a sponsors. And still right now, they like long timers or whatever, sometimes people with 20-something years of sobriety in here, They don't have a sponsor. And they don't want to even hear about sponsor. They never get to the steps. And it's kind of hard to explain them, your life's going to be much easier if you do so. If you discover yourself, but it's not my job. My job is right now to carry the message and show them it's really much easier to live when we take the steps. And I am so blessed right now. I just found this meeting. And you know what? Maybe it's not because it's like, because our secular meeting is every week, but our time is 9 p.m. So depends, what is the time zone in America. But like every other week, we're trying to do the speaker meeting. And I am looking for speakers also. And this will be translated at our meeting from English to Polish. So if any one of you or somebody would like to be a speaker, doesn't need to have at the secular meeting, I'm going to put my email address in here on chat. If you are willing, to be a speaker, just send me an email and I contact you. That would be just great because we try to do the meeting going. And people in Poland are really interested about speakers from United States. They're like, wow, because So thank you so much for being here. And I'm going to put my email address and please help me. Okay?
Okay, thank you. So glad you're here.
Yes.
Carol and Catherine.
Hi, I'm Catherine. I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Catherine.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you, Tracy and John, for having this really informative workshop. When I came into AA in 1981, I had no idea what a sponsor was. Nobody really clued me into it. I went to treatment. I was handed a big book, and I couldn't make hide nor hair of it. I did get a sponsor eventually when I started going to meetings after I got out of treatment. And the biggest favor that that sponsor did for me was to introduce me to service. She would take me to a halfway house for women, and we would read the 12 and 12. And that was a really good introduction to AA for me at the time. At that time, sponsees were not called sponsees, they were called pigeons, which I thought was pretty insulting. And then it graduated to sponsor, but the word I like best is mentor. I think it's a mentoring relationship. And when I sponsor people, I tell them I am not going to make decisions for you. I will tell you my opinions if you come to me with questions. I will kind of act as a mirror, but I won't make your decisions for you. That's up to you. You're an adult. I've seen sponsors that were bullying. I've seen sponsors that were just totally wanted to manage people's lives. I recently had a situation with a sponsee that it was a whole grand sponsor kind of network, and it was a disaster, and her, before she became my sponsee, she was being sponsored by somebody, and her sponsor was going to her grand sponsor and telling her everything that she said. And I told her that was not appropriate. And so I have something to share about one of my I only have one sponsee right now. And she has told me, she says, I am glad you're not my friend. And I've never said I'm not your friend. I'm friendly, but she said, I'm glad you're not like my friend, like I've known for 20 million years, because I can tell you things that I can't tell anybody else. And I can, and you can tell me things that I would never take from my friends. And I'm not a tough sponsor. I am really easy. But I have taken people through the big book, and I find it really good for newcomers to the meetings to give them some structure and also some idea of AA history. But I am new to the secular world. And I have kind of I'm leaving my old AA behind and learning some new things. And I did have a question for Joe C, because I had a situation come up in the last few months with somebody that I was sponsoring. This person was, she was an alcoholic. I was convinced of that. We talked a lot about that, but she was also a heroin. She had been a heroin addict. She was 5 years clean and sober. And, you know, she said, I'm duly addicted. And I said, well, that could be a problem. But I said, I'm willing to work with you. I said, I have no knowledge of that, you know, that culture, that world, whatever. And so we could run into trouble here. I kind of wanted, and she's no longer my sponsor. She relapsed on drugs. And I said, I think that you'd be better off with somebody that had more of a history like you. But wondered if Joe C would give me any kind of, if you've had any experience with that and could share with me.
Sure. Thanks for sharing. Just quickly, most of the time we're talking about recovery. So you got lots of experience with it. But it sounded like that was a case of crisis management, where, yeah, you would need to know a little bit about methadone. You would need to know a little bit about, the problem, so to speak. And I think you followed your gut and you were right? Like you can still be their friend. You can still help out, right? You know, but they maybe need to check out Heroin Anonymous or, get some medical help too, for sure.
Yeah, she did start going to NA, and she did find a sponsor in NA that's had like many years of experience as in the program. So I think she's in a good spot. She still calls me a couple times a week and so forth, but I was kind of at a loss. I'd never run into that situation before, and I just kind of had to wing it, you know. I wasn't so sure that I should have even taken her on in the first place, but I said, I just basically said, I'll share what I know about recovery.
There you go.
You know, I got her through the first 5 steps. She had never gotten through the first 5 steps before. And she kept always relapsing before she got to the 4th step. And I said, no, I think it's important that you do this. And she really appreciated it. So thank you so much for your insight. And that's all I have.
Thanks, Catherine. Thanks, Joe. And the ever grateful Jeb. Good to see you.
Thanks, John. Good to see you and hear all of you. Yeah, my name is Jeb, and I'm a grateful recovered addict alcoholic. And I love hearing discussions about how people approach sponsorship and what they expect of it, because it seems to be all over the place. And I think that's appropriate. I suddenly remembered when someone was sharing that my second sponsor in Missoula, Montana, referred to me as his baby. And for some reason, I accepted that. That was okay. I was Roger's baby. And that's maybe the same, like the idea of pigeon. I don't know when the expression sponsee came into the language, but it seems to me it's been fairly recent. But my experience, well, first of all, anytime that I went on a 12-step call or anytime I was meeting with a sponsee, it was suggested that I read that chapter, Working with Others, where it's working with a prospect. And I'm so grateful that Bill Wilson's modus operandi was to share or teach by example. And that's where the experience, strength, and hope thing works. And so, if I'm not working the 12 steps, I have no business trying to help anyone to follow along that path. And that's something I learned from Roger also. And they're taking it seriously, but Bill wrote it in the 12 and 12 that I need to learn to practice or utilize all 12 steps on a daily basis so that I and those around me can find emotional sobriety. And I'm not going to be much help to anybody if I don't have emotional sobriety. The other thing that comes to my mind is that my approach to sponsorship has changed radically over the years. And about 30 years ago, a woman in Missoula, Montana, asked me if I would be her step sponsor. And I said, bingo. That's exactly what it is for me, to tell how I apply the 12 steps to my daily life. And that's a lot easier than trying to quote the big book and say, you need to do this and give them a workbook sort of thing. But also, I learned, and I posted in the chat that thing from page 191 in As Bill Sees It, where Bill, talks about the steps are open to interpretation based on the experience and outlook of the individual. My approach to sponsorship has to depend upon the experience and outlook of the individual, what their belief system is, what their background is, all of those things. And that's just being, well, the word sponsor means responsible one. If I'm going to be responsible to that person, I need to be open to where he or she actually is at this moment, what they're going through, what they're dealing with. The other piece of sponsorship, I've heard many people say, well, I'm not a friend to my sponsees. That has never been my approach. If I can't be a friend, there's something wrong. If I don't trust another person enough to be able to sit with them and share enough of my stories so it encourages them to share theirs, something is wrong. So I do hope to be a sponsor. The other thing about sponsorship, I've had sponsors who've gone out and come back numerous times, but guess what? Because I am a responsible one, when they come back, I'm always here. I'm always willing to support them and help them get back on the path that they need. So that's the other piece that is so important. As my sane and sound ideal for my future relationships has grown over the last 40 years, I am a different person. I'm more careful of the kind of person and personality I present to the sponsee, or whatever we want to call them. And I try not to use the word sponsor because it sounds like master slave but in a guide, recovery partner. I sit down with somebody new as an equal, expecting to learn as much about the disease of addiction and myself as perhaps the other person does. So today is day 15,919. I'm still counting because I told me that's what I need to do, one day at a time. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Jeb. Muslim.
Hi, Özlem. I heard the other day someone said, I can't drink alcohol safely. That's how I'm gonna define myself. Sounds good. Anyway, I know we passed the time, but I'm new, and I have 5.5 months, and thank you. And that happened with Zoom, because I don't think I could find any meetings here that would have been helpful as much as the Zoom. So I have a sponsor since the first week, and she's awesome. She's 39 years sober. It's a traditional AA meeting, but she seems more open-minded than the other people. Like, she doesn't gasp when I tell her things about, like, I don't know, I'm stuck in 2 and 3, step 2 and 3, couldn't really pass that yet. Anyway, so I was thinking, I really like her. She's so wise. I don't want to say, okay, I think this is not good, I'm going to find someone else, because I think she has great things to offer, her experience, and I really like her. And she's not really like a sergeant, drill sergeant, do this, do that, call me every day. She says, I trust you a lot, and just, you can call me, and we talk. But okay, I'm coming to the question. So, like, is it okay to have a sponsor and then another sponsor? Because it feels like people only have one sponsor. So that's kind of my question. I know whatever helps you probably is the answer, but at the same time, I really feel like, like, am I cheating on her kind of thing? I know it's funny, but So just wanted to ask that. I really liked this meeting and it really resonated with what I was thinking and it helped. It really helped. So thank you.
Thank you. Joe, you have anything to say about that, or Tracy?
Tracy? Go with the results. Like, I think every sponsor-sponsee relationship is temporary, may last 40 years, but it's for now. And when a sponsor outgrows me and moves on, I'm never offended. I think that's wonderful. Get what you need and move on. And if you need more than one, why not? And if that stops working, reevaluate it for sure. But we're all in the scientific method, trial and error, right? Trial and progress.
Or as my sponsor said, it's okay to have more than one, but be sure and tell both of them that they exist. He wasn't talking about sponsors, but the same applies. Jen.
Hi, Jen.
Hi, Jen.
Hi, Jen. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Jen.
Did you know that I was an alcoholic? Yeah. And I love this topic. I talk about this topic all the time. And briefly, my sponsor was agnostic and his sponsor was a God person. My sponsor brought me through the way his sponsor did with the 12 and 12. We didn't sit and read her to sign me, I told him I want to do the steps. He goes, okay, 12. And so that's how we did it. And at the end of the day, he was explaining to me that the important thing was to understand and grasp the, can you hear me? Because something went completely for me. Okay. To understand the principle behind the step. So basically, I took that forward. And when I first started sponsoring, I did exactly what he did with me. It never felt 100% right, but it didn't feel 100% wrong. So, but now, years later, I've learned new ways, and I don't have a sponsor. Well, I didn't have a sponsor for a while when I moved, and although I was welcome to call him anytime back in Orlando, but I didn't. Maybe twice in 3 years I called him, but I did try to get a sponsor here. It didn't work out. But then this woman came into my meeting that I do online. It's a Santa Fe Freethinkers meeting. And I just was drawn to her. And we ended up, talking privately, like later on Zoom. And we just gab. In fact, our first conversation was about sponsorship because I was having problems with the sponsor. And I thought she could have some answers for me. So after an hour talking about my sponsee, we started talking about other stuff, and all of a sudden I was about to ask her if she would be my sponsor. But before I could ask her, she asked me. It was too funny. And so we decided to sponsor each other. So we sponsor each other, and I guess you can interpret that as recovery partners. She has more time than me, and I am older. So it kind of, I don't know what that means. But anyway, she didn't have a sponsor for a really long time. She doesn't really believe necessarily in sponsorship, yet she asked me to be her sponsor. So go ask an alcoholic if they want one or not. I don't know the answer. But and it's been great. It's gone on 4 months, and we're just there for each other. We meet once a week, and we decided we would read a secular sobriety together. I've never read any books with anybody ever. I just read the big book. My sponsor told me when I came in, you're going to want to read the big book. I said, okay. So I took a weekend and I read it. And he was like, what? I said, yeah, I read it. He goes, what? And I said, yeah, I read the whole thing. And so but yeah, I used to go to book study meetings, you know, it was a meeting would be, you know, a reading through it, you know, and it wasn't a regular thing, just a thing here and there. So I've reread parts of it over the years, but basically a secular sobriety, that's what we're doing together, and it's great fun. Thanks for letting me share.
All right. Thanks, Jen. Appreciate it. Well, thank you, Joe. I always appreciate your support, personally and professionally. And Tracy, it was great to have you in our meeting. I really appreciated your share. And it's great to see that people who are not in secular AA can sponsor people who are in secular AA and vice versa. I have sponsees who are both ways. I don't mean that they're bi. I mean that I have different sponsees that are different. So I just want to say that thank you everybody for being here, and thanks Kat and Megan and for
John's bi-spiritual.
helping.
That's what I'm going with now.
What's that?
You're bi-spiritual.
Bi-spiritual. Yeah. Actually, I'm fluid. So, because of daylight savings time, you know, our meeting starts at 11 o'clock for Arizona people, but it stays the same for everybody else. That is, this workshop does. And if you have any feedback or anything, please feel free to email us at the email that I put in the chat. You can save the chat or you can copy and paste it. Please remember the opinions expressed here tonight are strictly those of the individuals expressing them. What you've heard here was spoken in confidence, should be treated as such. We share to help ourselves and each other, so we welcome everyone's experience, strength, and hope. Many of us have found that when we consider what we've heard with an open mind and heart, we gain a better understanding of ourselves and each other. We also learn how to handle our day-to-day problems better. Since members often share both trials and triumphs with each other, please let there be no gossip or criticism, but only love and appreciation, understanding, and companionship. And we like to end our meetings with the responsibility pledge or declaration, whatever you want to call it. And I don't think I put it up to be able to share it to the screen, but if you know it and you want to unmute, please feel free. Who is responsible? I am responsible.
I am responsible.
And anyone, anywhere, reaches out for help, I want the hand of AA always to be there. And for that, I am responsible. Look at that. I got it up by the time we were done. How about that? Thanks, everybody.